While we are waiting, why don't we just introduce ourselves?
You want me to go ahead and get started? I was waiting to give like 11:05 to make sure
No
everyone.
no problem. Just go ahead and start. I mean, at least introducing ourselves while we are waiting.
Yeah, okay, I'll go for it. So good morning, everyone. I hope you are all having a great day so far. My name is Julieta Romero, and I am a public relations student here at A&T. And today I am your host and moderator of this panel. I would like to first thank everyone for joining us and having this open discussion with us about this revolutionary innovation that has been sparking up lots of conversation lately. Before getting started, I would like to introduce our 5 panelists. We have Rihanna Vines, a public relations student, Mason Smalls, an electrical engineering student, Tamia Leek, also an electrical engineering student, Nadia Gray, a mass media production student, and Alexis Cathcart, a computer science engineering student. And I would also like to give a big thank you to them for joining us today and agreeing to this panel. And just as a side note, before getting started, please feel free to ask any questions or comments throughout the discussion. Just use the hand raising button to grab our attention. And we will also leave some time at the end for questions and comments as well. So just a little introduction about artificial intelligence. This will be, again, like the topic of discussion. As algorithms continue to spread everywhere, we are here to explore the benefits and the downsides of how algorithms impact society. Engineers are shaping our future in the sense that they are the ones creating algorithms and AI, and students pursuing a communications degree, as well as communication professionals, are able to help voice the public's opinion, concerns, and sentiments over this new technological revolution. In order to ensure that the technology being developed is ethical, it is important to understand what composes AI's code, design, and use. And that is, AI is typically based on algorithms that make predictions to support or even fully automate decision-making. And due to these algorithms, we've seen research and articles being written that talk about the impacts these technologies have, such as biases and discrimination, deepfakes, which is a type of AI used to create convincing images, audio and video portraying something that didn't actually occur, and privacy issues and unemployment issues. So one of the first questions I have for our engineers is if they could describe their current research and methodology that they are currently working on or have worked on. So anyone can go first.
I guess I can kick it off a little bit. Hello, everybody. My name is Mason Smalls, senior electrical engineering student again. And I guess I'm not doing any dedicated research to AI, but I'm in a class right now called genetic algorithms, which is essentially AI at its core. It's the algorithm itself. Along with that, I'm currently in that class in a project to recreate a Tetris kind of AI that can play Tetris better than a human. That's essentially what I'm doing. And then on the side, looking at things like neural networks, we're looking at ChatGPT to see really what it is and how powerful it is, just stuff like that in general.
Thank you. Alexis or Tamia, whoever wants to go next.
I can go next. I'm Tamia Leek, an electrical engineering student, and this year my undergrad research consisted of building an autonomous navigation an autonomous navigation simulator with Carla. And so with those, I was dealing a lot with pretty much creating, like, using sensors and variations of kind of code to be able to focus on autonomous navigation and how that works in everyday life.
And Alexis.
Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Alexis Cathcart, and I'm a senior computer science student. In the past, I would say I've worked a lot on AI and machine learning in 2 separate occasions. So currently, I'm an undergraduate research assistant, and so my project is focusing on identifying cultural biases that may be embedded in food journaling apps. So essentially, you have food journaling apps that people may utilize in order to keep track of their diet, their nutrition, things of that nature. And that's, it's a really great supplement, especially for people that may not have access to healthcare. But throughout my research, I've seen that there's a lot of cultural biases and that underrepresented minority populations, especially from immigrant communities, they're not being well recognized within these food journaling apps. Their cuisines are not available, and so nutritional data for that information for those cuisines is not readily accessible towards these communities, which is of course a big issue because a lot of these communities do face health disparities. And then on a separate occasion for my senior project, I also developed an AI model with my teammates. And so our AI model was focusing on utilizing image processing to understand how you can take like the image of a person and determine their hair type. So, you have people that have very curly hair, people that have coily hair, people that have straight hair, things like that, being able to determine the different hair textures and getting essentially a categorization from an AI model of a person's hair.
Thank you. So I want to go back to the major concerns that I mentioned before. So AI has brought up some major concerns, and I would like to provide some examples of how these concerns have been affecting people in different ways. So first, with biases and discrimination, police departments are using facial recognition software, which they know that misidentifies up to 97% of Black suspects, leading to false arrests. So, and then with deepfakes, there are concerns that deepfakes can be used to create fake news and misleading videos. For example, a group of New York students made a video of their principal saying racist remarks and threatening students. And that can be detrimental for the principal. Privacy concerns. The main concern is the potential for data breaches and unauthorized access to personal information, with one of the biggest ongoing cases involving Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg, and where he was sued in 2018 for failure to protect the privacy and data of Facebook users. And this is because the breach in data that was occurring allowed third parties to obtain personal data from over 87 million Americans and manipulated that data in the 2016 election. And then with unemployment issues, manufacturing, agriculture, communication, food service, and many other industries benefit from AI in numerous ways. But it is estimated that AI and automation could affect or eliminate 1/4 of the jobs here in the US. So with this being said, for these student engineers here, what are you hearing about AI and algorithms in this regard? And in your workspace, has this been a concern? Has this been a topic of concern? Anyone, Mason, Alexis, or Tamia?
I can go ahead and kick it off. So for me personally, I definitely I haven't heard all of those concerns, but I've heard some of them, for example, the face recognition software, as well as the concerns within the replacing people in the workspace. I know that type of stuff. Honestly, it is kind of scary. It is a little weird because AI is such a fast evolving, I guess, technology. But I feel like in all the ways that it's a negative thing, it can also be seen as a positive thing, because since it's so new, there haven't really been a lot of people who have come together to develop a defense for it. However, I feel like as it becomes more refined and as it becomes more integrated, those types of policies will be put in place, kind of like cars back in the past. I know at first cars definitely took a lot of the load off of people and they shortened travel times. However, they were unregulated. And just like long story short, as AI is getting more and more used, I feel like things will come into place within other markets or other areas of research to kind of regulate it in order to make it something that is not quite so easy to take advantage of.
And I see Stacy has her hand up.
Yeah, one of the things, and maybe I guess I would ask the panelists, one of the things that you mentioned is that AI is potentially going to eliminate jobs. Do you know if anyone has done any studies specifically to identify which jobs or which types of jobs would be impacted the most and the earliest? Because one of the other concerns, and I'm thinking about this from a sociological standpoint, one of the big things that I'm seeing in the news today is not wanting people to work remotely. However, if you're telling people that they have to be in the office and interfacing with each other in order to do their jobs effectively, how do you rationalize replacing those jobs with AI that has no human interaction? Do you guys have any thoughts on that? And I think, Alexis, if you don't mind, I think you're working in a space, from what I'm understanding from your research, that kind of touches on some of those things. Specifically, more importantly, I kind of just want to hear your opinion about that from a researcher's perspective.
Yes, so I definitely agree with what you're saying. I do think that one of the big issues with AI is that there's the whole issue of utilizing like algorithms and computers and things of that nature to basically replace like human interaction. And that's a major issue because to me, robots, AI, algorithms, things like that, they can't replicate human sentiment. So they can't replicate actual human feelings, being able to understand someone else from like a human perspective. That's something that just can't be replicated. And I think that's a major issue that's come about with AI because there's an attempt to basically replace everything that's seen as like a minor job or something that's like very low skill. But a lot of those things require that human interaction. And so if that is missing, then of course that's going to lead to major issues because you have people that are being basically overlooked because, you know, the person that's developing these algorithms, they're trying to develop basically a cookie cutter perception of like what a person is, what a person should be, what a person should expect. And so if you don't have, I guess you say if you don't have the full grasp of everyone, then of course you're missing out on that. And that's something that's very hard to capture. It's really hard to get information on every single person because everybody has like their own unique backgrounds, their own unique perspectives, things of that nature. And that can only really be, I guess, interface very well when you have an actual human available to do so. So I think that's something that needs to be touched on a lot within AI and machine learning. And I think that's something that should be taught more. From like my experience with computer science, there isn't necessarily a big emphasis on understanding like the sociological perspective towards different issues impacting technology, like how the technology has been developed to be more representative of human populations and things of that nature. But I do also recognize that a lot of people are starting to push more for that, just to understand how we can make things more accessible, how we can make sure that people are being better recognized by AI and machine learning so that it's not becoming to the point where people are basically being replaced by technology.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you, Alexis. Did any other anyone want to join in on that part of the conversation? I know Nadia also has a question or a comment. If not, you can go ahead.
I do actually. Hello, I'm Nadia Gray. I am a freshman mass media production student, and I am an artist and audio engineer. From what I come into this conversation as somebody that has dabbled in and worked in these fields. And so what I hear a lot from the idea of the putting AI, putting people's jobs in jeopardy is that it started small at first, yes, but in a way it's already happening to the point of I've watched people pretty much wipe their hands of and leave jobs that they've been in for 30, 40 years. So I do agree that while AI can be, and I'm excited for it as a tool to assist all of us, there needs to be something where we take a step back and stop, I hate to say it like this, but stealing from artists, because artists are not getting paid as their work is getting fed into these algorithms. A great example of this is fairly recent. October 2022, a Korean artist by the name of Kim Jung-gi had recently passed, and not even within 24 hours of us hearing about his passing, someone had taken his art and fed it into an AI. And so it's just like, it's sort of disheartening to see as someone that wants to continue in, right? And seeing people that have been established in not even being respected as people and being seen as content or fodder for. And so I think in the future, those of us from the arts and humanities side and those of us from the STEM side need to come together to move forward and push through this, or like to examine this, excuse me, from a sociological perspective.
Thank you, Nadia.
Okay, let me follow up with a question. I think this is very interesting. Don't you think a lack of understanding from our side is maybe contributing to this lack of regulation? It's not really is the AI in my mind. It is lack of regulation, like misuse, just like in any other field. It is the cause of all this misperception in my mind. Remember that who are training AI? You see, first let's ask that question. It's us, isn't it? So then can we come up with a rule and regulation to make sure that things like that will not happen? So this is just a beginning in my mind. So I know there are a lot of maybe, misunderstanding about AI is going to take my job away. To me, I am looking at AI is going to work hands in hands with me to make things better for us. This is how I am looking at the problem, rather than saying that AI is becoming an issue or is going to take a job away from anybody. Just like a follow-up question, you see there are two folks from journalism that are part of this. Question that I have even from them is this: why do you think that ethics is important from their point of view? And how is it that they see their future would be shaped by knowing more about AI?
So hi, I'm going to respond to that. I am Rihanna Vines. I'm a junior public relations student from Atlanta, Georgia, and I agree wholeheartedly with you. I do believe that sometimes our fears and concerns about AI are very valid. The fears about the biases are proven, like those are clear. However, I do think that it leaves a beautiful opportunity to address some of those biases, because the thing about AI, we, like you said, are in control of it and we create it. I want to give an example too. When I first came across ChatGPT, I spoke to one of my mentors about it with the same fears, like, oh my gosh, people are going to get lazy. People are already lazy. Like, they're not going to want to do this and do that. And he broke it down to me. At the end of the day, it's two types of people in the world. It's type of people that are going to use this system for the benefit of them and to grow and learn, or they're going to allow this system to use them and become codependent on it. And I think as journalism students, and as well in the arts and humanities, what we have to do to stay at the forefront of being able to use these technologies to our benefits is to basically re-look at how we're looking at this and update our standards of education, updates our standards of ethics, about perfect example how PR is today. PR isn't what it was 30 years ago, because once upon a time, it was quote unquote unethical to take payment for advertisement for a PR company. But now that's what PR looks like in a content creation world, in a social media world. So it's like we have to learn how to adapt and not get left behind in the dust as this fast new technology is developing. We should be developing with it. So I do think another important thing that we have to learn is how are we going to incorporate the future of AI into our curriculum now?
I think you make a really good point, and I don't want to take this off track, but because we know in the world we live in, there's already bias. And you say you've spoken to one of your mentors, and I'm looking at all of you who are African-American students who are involved in this area. But when you look at the percentage of the representation that you have in this space, and this space being so small, and you look at the the level that you have people of color as decision makers with businesses. I mean, Zuckerberg is a good example. If you have people who are ultimately the decision makers, or the majority of people who are working in this area don't even have an awareness or a real comprehension of the biases that come in there, and the number of people like yourselves is minimal, and depending on what role you take is not as impactful as some other people, then I think, just like we have systemic racism, there should continue to be a concern about who makes those decisions and how those decisions are represented. I don't disagree with your point, but there's always an alternative to look at that. And I think the experience that most of us have as African Americans, regardless of what we're told, we see a different reality than what we are told.
To that point, I want to definitely say I agree to that. I'm a political science minor as well. So, and a lot of the work that I do extracurricular at A&T is with advocacy for our people. And my opinion on that is that we do live in an inherently racist and justice society. And beyond racism, we have patriarchy, we have sexism, we have trans and homophobia. So it's so many different layers to the different injustices within our country. And that's where I do feel like the opportunity with AI is beautiful, because where we have been learning that representation matters, it can be pushed on a mass scale into technology and AI, not only from an engineering side, because everyone doesn't want to be an engineer, right? But as a communications person, as a political science person, as an arts major, as whatever other major, a business major, we all should have and incorporate some type of AI training where we're able to know when and how to represent for each other when we're in these rooms. Even if we may not be per se an expert in the algorithm, we can be an expert in knowing how to advocate and tell people to be mindful of these different biases and to represent. Representation is always going to be the main thing that's going to limit us from these biases taking over and limiting us from not being able to benefit from AI. But I definitely agree. Those are valid concerns. And our country we have so much work in things that I can't say to undo, because you can't undo some of these things, but things that needs to be addressed. And I think AI could be a great, powerful tool on the mass communication side to get that type of information out and to educate others, not only African Americans, of these injustices and biases, but also others in a way where we're able to use AI to know how to best reach them and best allow them to see messages that they may not otherwise understand or take in from our perspective, if that makes sense.
Yes, and I appreciate the way that you actually jumped in to articulate your response, because I think that is it's very important that people continue to articulate those things. So I appreciate your response to the question and looking at it from a broader perspective rather than, because you're seeing both sides, and I appreciate your ability to see both sides of the issue. So I applaud you with your response.
Thank you so much. That was a great question.
If I could chime in, I guess a little bit to kind of piggyback off Rihanna. Is that how you say her name? Okay, cool. To piggyback off of her response from, I guess, the engineering side, I feel like it's very valuable for communications as well as sociology and psychology to really come together when it comes to making those decisions, because while AI might be kind of like an engineering created tool, or it isn't always engineering, it's used for how does it need to do it. And I feel like that's where communications and kind of social sciences come into play, especially when it comes to seeing what it needs to do to kind of get rid of those systematic biases. For example, you have like an ethical team of well-represented people of all different cultures come together to say, hey, we want news say, for example, AI to speak to this and speak to these people? How do we need to have that happen? That conversation is one that's handled way better within communications and social sciences, I feel like, better than in the engineering community. And then after that, I guess after that decision is made, then feed it over to the engineering side for them to create an algorithm based off of those responses. So I guess long story short, I feel like we need to come together as a bigger community of scientists and researchers in all different backgrounds in order to really, I wouldn't say humanize the AI, but really make sure everything is well represented.
Okay, to kind of piggyback off of what everyone else was saying about AI. So as an engineer, I feel like kind of, engineers should kind of support AI. I'm kind of very flat middle because when I think of AI, AI is supposed to benefit the public. It's supposed to benefit the world, things like that. But for me, my research project was on autonomous driving. When it comes to autonomous driving, obviously there could be a lot of improvement done. And so, for instance, we're using Tesla as an example of my research project. And sometimes you may see in an article things, oh, Tesla has crashed, some incident has happened with Tesla. And so when it comes to AI, when I think about AI, it's just like, we have taxis, we have Ubers, we have Lyfts to replace Tesla. So my thing is, would we really spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on a newly, I guess, improvised technology to kind of drive us around that's kind of not even, fully kind of figured out yet? And so with my research project, I did a lot of trying to figure out, okay, where's the algorithms going wrong at? Where's the algorithms going wrong? Does traffic, does weather, does pedestrians being in this specific spot at this specific moment, can that cause an autonomous vehicle to kind of go left or to kind of go another direction? And so when I think about AI and algorithms, I don't know, I just think that we need a lot of improvement. I think regardless of what AI it is. And I also agree with everyone stating that when it comes to AI, I do believe that we are, taking jobs of, especially because there's no human interaction. AI is technology. So with technology, there's not a lot of human interaction, but I do believe that with AIs, we can definitely use a lot of improvement, a lot of improvement when it comes to AI.
Well, good morning, everybody. And sorry I was a few minutes late, but I have enjoyed your conversation. The AI is a new tool. Whenever a new tool is introduced into a society, there are debates. And of course, there are advantages, disadvantages. This is it's in its early stages. So, typewriter was a tool, email is a tool, was a tool, AI is a tool, probably is going to replace email and our interaction, and related to your comments about biases and discrimination, probably AI could help those who hire to find, through the algorithms, they could find better matches for the available positions. And therefore, there'll be less bias in the hiring process. Follow me? And also, when it comes to safety issues, driving or other technologies, there will be more safety features embedded into automobiles and other technologies that will benefit us. Fewer accidents, safer roads, and what have you. So there are many advantages, and at the same time, there are some disadvantages, and some of those disadvantages would be in the area of ethical issues. Who uses the technology, the tool, for what purpose? And of course, When it comes to hacking, probably hackers will have an easier job of hacking. But again, there are a lot of issues, a lot of possibilities, and we still really, we are in the early stages of this and the chat GPT. So together, chat GPT and AI certainly are going to transform everything, including education and teaching and industry and what have you, as like robots and automation and so forth. So this is an issue that we are going to debate and for many years to come. But I'm glad that you are, a group of sharp students who are paying attention and debating and have participated in this panel, and I appreciate your contributions.
Thank you, Dr. Kamalapour. So I want to piggyback off to Mia's point with how she was talking about her work and how she implements and thinks about AI. That is actually a great segue into the next question I had, which was for clarity as an engineer, when you're creating these algorithms as part of your work, are these ethical and social impacts part of your consideration during your work? If not, why? And if yes, how? So if Mason and Alexis could also answer that as well, please.
So from my personal understanding, or actually just from my own personal experience, I would say for a lot of engineers, no. And the reason isn't because they don't care about the environment, they don't care about the impacts that it would have. It's more because I guess, everybody thinks differently. The thing about a lot of engineers is they want to create, they want to break boundaries, and they really want to strive to be the best they can be and to reach the most, reach the pinnacle of their own careers personally. And that comes with creation, that comes with innovation. And sometimes that comes with, so a lot of times within engineering, I guess, to give it some context, people create things, however, they don't use it for what it's used for today. For example, somebody could create a really powerful device and they wouldn't really see the impact of it until maybe 100 years after their death. I can't give any specific examples because I don't want to be wrong. However, I say that to say a lot of people just create to create. They don't create wondering, is this going to be used 100 years from now for evil? Is it going to be used for, to better humanity? They simply enjoy creating, and that's kind of where their passion is driven. So I would say no.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Mason.
No problem.
Yes, I just wanted to follow up with Mason's point. I definitely agree. I do think within engineering, a lot of the focus is just like on innovation, doing something like the for the first time. And I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. I do think that kind of motivates people to think outside the box. But I think it's really important to recognize how focusing so much on basically getting to the finish line, but not recognizing like all the different paths that you have to take to get to that point. I think that's a major issue that is common amongst engineering. And it's something I've experienced myself firsthand. Within my research experience, the focus of the project is very health focused. And so for me, I don't have a health background. Everything is just engineering. And so on my research team, most of the people on the team are also like coming from an engineering background. They have a lot of experience within computer engineering, computer science, things like that. So it's really important for us to basically make our research interdisciplinary because there's only so much that we know about our particular topic related to food journaling apps. And so that's why we also have people on our research team that have experience like in nursing, pharmacology, data analysis, genetics, things like that, because they're able to bring in those skills, those perspectives, different things like that, that we as engineers may not understand or we may not, know. And so I think just an overarching thing within engineering is that, for lack of a better word, there's a lot of ignorance that's present. And it's solely because the focus is just on, as I mentioned before, the focus is on innovation. And so I think that ignorance and innovation is really hard to like kind of mix those together, because they lead to, in the long run, they lead to different issues. It may be something that happens immediately, and maybe something that happens 10, 15, maybe even 50 or 100 years from now, as Mason was talking about. And so I think altogether what's really important is that we recognize how we can utilize engineering, but also blending it in with other disciplines altogether, because there's only so much that engineers can do. And so if they're just going solely on whatever knowledge that they have, it's going to cause issues. They need to have other people that are available to basically provide other perspectives, because, you know, there's only so much that you can do. And I think that's something that's really just showcased on a lot of different situations. You know, like if you're ever working on a project, you know, you may have an interest in it, you may understand like this, that, and the third about it, but it's so helpful to have other people to give like their insights on something, because they're bringing new perspectives that you may not have, you know, taken into consideration. And so that can honestly make your project a lot better, because it's addressing issues that you initially overlooked solely because somebody else gave their input on it.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, so I wanted to respond to both of you guys. For one, I think that it's a very interesting perspective to hear how, from Mason, like sometimes you do just create and don't think of it, and everyone does that no matter what discipline you're in. I think that was definitely a point that I liked. And to that, I wanted to kind of put something on your mind, or really all of our minds going forward when we're in this spirit of creating. And I want us to start asking this question: how can we benefit? How can what we just created benefit the marginalized? And this may be something that you just ask afterwards. And if you don't have the answer, where you can make it clear and give that to the marginalized when you're giving this creation to the world, then we ask our colleagues. That's where the spirit of collaboration goes into. Like, if you know you just created something that could beat the most highest scoring Tetris, and it may be able to apply to different areas of different games, maybe that we may not have always. Before I go too deep into that, you can just come ask a journalism student. You can ask a political science student. You can ask an art student, hey, how do you think this could benefit you? Or how do you think this could be applied to a different area in life? And that's how we're going to be able to continue to represent each other, because the truth is, like said, it's going to be disadvantages and advantages to everything. And it's always going to be gray areas. So one person alone could never, or even a group of people all in the same discipline could never see all of the issues on the other side of what may seem like the opposite. Like, to many, engineering and journalism would seem to be opposite. So ask your journalism friends or your journalism colleagues, and vice versa.
I think that's an excellent response to that. And I'm going to jump in here and then I'm going to stop because I talk a lot. But before I joined my role at NCAT, one of the things I worked for Verizon as a project manager, and my background is in business, but I worked with engineers very closely on developing new ideas and solutions. And one of the things that I will say that I learned is, yes, there are different modes of thinking. So I like the way, Rihanna, that you responded to that, to make sure you bring in different people with different perspectives, especially if the area of your research is going to touch on a particular mode of society. But I say all that to say, and Tamia, you can attest to this. One of the things that I always emphasize, especially for students, because of my exposure to engineers, is I always emphasize learn how to look at the broader world, at the broader perspective. And that's great that you have an engineering or even people who are in communications. Look at the world not just from the perspective of the things that you're most interested in, but step back and always try to see the forest for the trees, so to speak. So always have, I think, broader perspective of listening and learning different things. Just because you're the best engineer in the world doesn't mean that you can't also be interested in art and literature and other things that will make you more well-rounded, and I think bring a more well-rounded perspective to what you do from an engineering perspective, and vice versa. If you're a communications person, look at it from a broader perspective than just communications and look at the broader impact. So I applaud all of you for your responses. I think they're very good responses, and I'm glad to see that you're all just not single-threaded in your perspectives and your thinking.
To piggyback off of what Mason and Miss Stacy was saying, so as engineers, we definitely are taught to innovate. We're definitely taught to come up with all of these solutions and development. As that, working on this project, one thing that Miss Stacy has made me realize was look into the broader perspective. Coming into this project, I didn't know anything about Python. I didn't know anything about algorithms. I didn't know anything about coding. I'm more of a hands-on. So if you give me something to put together, I can put it together. But when it comes to like scripts and codes, I didn't know anything. So it was important for me to reach out to PhD students, grad students, to kind of get a broader gist of, okay, I don't know this, but I know that here are other people around me that can kind of help me with this, and that. And so it's very important when it comes to doing your work, regardless of what field you are in, it's always good to have another, it's good to have another kind of vision from someone else that's kind of already been through, or somebody who has the same vision as you, so you can kind of have that guidance along with that. But yes, looking at the broader tree, especially when it's to your work, like regardless of what your work is, it's always good to kind of focus on the bigger picture, because you're not only thinking about how this work is going to impact you and those around you, but the world, global, and things like that. So Miss Stacy, she definitely helped me realize that working throughout my research project. So
just to further piggyback off of what everyone else has said, I do think that we need to continue to walk in the spirit of collaboration. It both in the field of like, not to do movie quotes, but see a need, fill a need. As we talk to each other, we can figure out where exactly, like our engineering students, where you guys' talents can be best like pointed towards. So it's not just creation for the sake of, but it's for the purpose of, and of course, vice versa. But I also think if we need to, well, we do need to, but to better communicate with each other, we need to learn to speak each other's language. I feel like sometimes we forget that the way that, say, a journalism student or business student is taught to talk of and think of things in the way that an engineer student is taught to talk about and think of things is completely different. And so sometimes we may get carried away and we start to delve into terminology and jargon that may sound smart or is clear as day to someone in our respective fields. But when we're trying to reach out with each other, we need to remember to, and that's not even necessarily a matter of us having to dumb down our language, but maybe just, we don't all need to be experts in everything, but to learn a little bit so that we can all better communicate with our peers and with our coworkers.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, Nadia. So it is essentially what you are saying is we have to break out of our silos. And that's the future. We can no longer afford, you, us, and we can no longer afford to live in silos. We have to connect and broaden our perspective. That's a very good point.
Yeah, let me just add something else also to this discussion. The following is something that we take many things for granted. In what way? We think that just like a right of way is something that we do when we come to an intersection, isn't it? When we are driving a car, right of way is something that all of us respect. But what about for machine? Do we have such a thing like right of way? So many things that we do as a human, we are hoping that the AI is also going to be replicating. There was a question here about, first we get excited about what we invent. Do we think about what it may cause at the beginning? Most of the time I say that no. We are just excited that we have done something new, but then we are hoping that people in the other side, like social scientists, they are the one that they're gonna bring ethics, issues related to ethics into the picture, because we as an engineer or computer scientist, we don't really think about these things most of the time. But then people on the other side, that's why we have a diversity of a mind and a kind also, that bring these issues into the table, and hopefully they will be augmented as part of the algorithm, for example, for autonomous vehicle.
Thank you. And so I feel like this conversation has been really great. I do want to go into the communications aspect now. So one of the industries being affected by AI is the communications industry. A communications aspect is very important, as we have seen, because those in the communications field can use their voice to express concerns about AI to engineers. These concerns can be done through news releases, news segments, an article, or by working directly with engineers and conducting research on the communications aspect. Some ways that AI will impact the media industry over the next decade are that AI can help identify patterns and trends in data, making it easier to understand what is happening in the media landscape. AI can create targeted media lists for media interviews or releases. AI can also help monitor brand reputation and brand and media impressions. And AI can help identify potential crises before they happen. So now, sorry, I just want to move on to the next slide. There we go. So now a question I have for our communication students is that, well, tools now exist that can help you identify influencers in your industry using AI. This data analysis allows you to target your audience and create more efficient and effective content. This is supposed to let you target your communications more effectively and build relationships with key leaders. Do you think that this type of data analysis creates a problem with bias and discrimination?
Okay, so I'll take that. I think to say that this new technology creates a bias or discrimination would be wrong to say. I think the biases and discriminations have been in our country there or around the world in general. What it's going to do is translate the way that bias and discrimination looks. And that's a new way to learn about how we can solve this bias and discrimination, as I was saying earlier. When I go back to an example of what you were saying about how, let's say you need to look for a certain type of person in the job industry, or you need to, basically what I'm saying, if our bias and discrimination is based off of data that is being input by humans, then what we have to do is make sure that the humans are represented on a much larger scale. And that's what I feel like would be the hardest part of trying to do, because as Ms. Stacy was saying earlier, we do represent as minorities or whatever area of marginalized people you may be in. We do represent such a small scale when it comes to data input. But I think it's easier now that this technology is researching things for us at a much quicker rate to identify these biases and discriminations and get ahead of them. And that takes me back to what I was saying earlier about the importance of us being up to standard and above standard, actually. And it just makes me think of Aggie Pride, achieving great goals in everything, producing renowned individuals dedicated to excellence. If we're going to be dedicated to excellence, we have to do that in all areas of all industries. And as a communications major, I do want it to be a push in the near future for us to start having, whether it's master classes, a once a semester class, whatever we have, or we have experts come in and teach us how to use AI and how not to be like in fear of AI and its capabilities. And definitely have to be looking out for those biases and discriminations and things that we can do to help eradicate those in the technology.
Thank you, Rihanna.
May I suggest something in here for clarification, and then we move on? Question that here, do you think this type of data analysis create a problem with bias and discrimination? Question is, the first question that we should ask, how do we train AI? You see, question is, AI is nothing but a set of data that somebody has created, and we train these AI based on those data. If the data that we have, we generated or collected, are only from certain sectors of the society, then therefore the biases and discrimination are going to be there, because it is being trained based on one sector and opinion of a society. But now, if we have plenty data that it is a representation of, it is an inclusive, then I think that biases and discrimination will go away. So it's a function of participation of all, not just.
I agree. And I want to say to that, I think a perfect example of me being an African-American woman, something that I've often heard about the disadvantages that African-Americans have in this country is the fact that technically we're 300 years behind per se from the effects of slavery, right? But the thing with AI technology, it's a relatively new technology. So if we are pushing to our students in communications or in whatever discipline that we're in, that this is our chance to get ahead, and we're showing them the importance and the advantages that we have in this new technology, then it would, I feel like, motivate many to pay attention. That's the biggest thing, because I'm not an AI expert by far. I just found out about AI and what it really was only a couple months ago, and I never really did any in-depth research into it other than use it, and then most recently to prepare for this panel. But my whole point to that is saying it doesn't take being an expert to know how you can use something to your advantage. Just like voting, you don't always have to know everything about policies and every single policy that has came up, but you need to know when your voting time is and who's going to be on those polls. And if we are teaching each other the basics and learning the basics of AI, we have an advantage to not per se take over, but to take back some of the power that we have as African Americans felt like we were denied of for so long. So I think no matter what industry you're in, as an African American, AI should be at one of your priorities of something that you should be getting passionate about or starting to form some way to incorporate your passion into AI, because AI is everything. AI is a part of everything now. AI has always been a part of everything if you're Gen Z, because we have been indoctrinated into technology. Anytime we wake up in the morning and touch our phones, that's AI right there. So I think is people, once they understand what the basics of it is, they'll be a little more, as a at least college student anyway, a little more open to learning more and wanting to be a part of the change in the biases and discriminations.
May I ask you a question? Because we talk about such generalities that bias and all this and that. Could you be more specific? What do you have in mind? What kind of examples you can give us for a particular bias? Because one of the oldest biases is, say, in medicine, right? In health systems, because many data was gathered, say, for certain diseases for men, and there is very little known for women. So there is a bias in artificial intelligence in that area that has to be addressed. But you have some other kinds of bias in mind. So could you be more specific? What do you mean about that?
Absolutely. I'll give you a perfect example.
Just examples and particulars, because we talk about generalities, AI, everybody says AI. I got a phone call from my friend who listened a lot of conspiracy theories, and she wanted to talk about that. So people have all kinds of ideas about artificial intelligence, but what do you as a scientist and and in, say, in people in media, etc.? What are the particulars that we ought to address? Thank you.
That's a great question. And I want to say, first of all, your example of medicine, of how the biases within men and women is a perfect example. That's how patriarchy would play part in some of the biases and discriminations in data. But I'll give you a perfect example for me as a Black girl. If I go to Google and I say, Google, show me, I wouldn't tell Google this, but type in braided hairstyles. The most likely thing that is going to come up is white women. And your chances of seeing someone with some braids, even though that's a cultural thing to us, is going to be low until I start putting keywords in like Black girl with braids. And growing up, that representation, I always wondered, okay, why do I always have to put in Black girl? But now that I know what AI is, I understand that. And it shows like, because the people who are creating this data for whatever, like that's search engine optimization, basically SEO. And I know that just from having a business. So if my data going in for search engine optimization, the people entering that data are white women or white men, that's going to be what their life is like. That's all they see when they think of braids for the most part. So that's what's going to come up. That's one example on a small scale that may not be so, I guess, harmful. Another example would be perfect, I think, thinking about hiring systems. If you're thinking about hiring systems and you're looking up specific keywords and character traits that you're looking for out of a worker, and then the data that has been input by the system only represents a certain demographic of people, or whatever these people think that demographic looks like, then those are where the biases will come up, where more often than not, you will see people from minorities or people from different marginalized groups will be left out in these searches. So does that answer your question? That's just from my example as a mass communications person. Anybody else could answer too.
Yeah, thank you. To some extent, the first bias that was mentioned in artificial intelligence that I was aware of was in face recognition, right? That artificial intelligence software that is used for identifying people by their features as they are encoded in face recognition software, that created a lot of problems. So what are you as a future scientist are going to do about that?
Well, if I may speak to that, while I myself am not in the engineering field, just for more examples of biases, also in the field of medicine and also in security and facial recognition, is that because we are not in these spaces, or we are in these spaces, but for fear of losing our jobs, we may not speak up as often as we should. Certain biases go through. So oftentimes for security and facial recognition, if you're a person of color, not just a Black person, but say if you're Hispanic, or even to a certain extent, if you're like Asian, right? If you're just not white, they may see you as more so of a threat. But also in that same way, especially as a dark-skinned woman, more often than not, these facial recognitions will not see dark-skinned women as women or Black women as women. They'll categorize us as men. And so that's one of those things where we need to actually, of course, it's because it's machine learning, we need to make sure that all of the data is going in, that women come in all shades and colors and face shapes and sizes, because if we only define what a certain demographic looks like, or a certain class of people looks like as one thing, there's just tons of people that may be and will be excluded or thrown under the bus. And that's something that we need to be aware of. Mason, do you have your hand up?
Okay, so let me ask you. So you are in mass media production. So people who are, say, in environmental movements like activists, etc., they are engaged in all kinds of programs now, very much in the news, right? About saving environments, etc. There are very small percentage of them are actually in any kind of environmental science related field. They are just aware, but you are in mass media. So what is your role in that field? So you don't have to be a computer scientist. I mean, there's very small percentage of computer scientists, people who are in artificial intelligence actually. So, but you are a person who are trained, I guess, in mass media, then you are trained in to be a specialist in communicating the important issues to the wide public. So what do you think you can do about that?
Mhm. Well, let
I
me.
mean, that is
Mhm.
the bias that exists in various fields in our society. So
Mhm.
you have a very important role because you are the person who will talk to the masses. An engineer who is developing artificial intelligence, most probably he talks to his colleagues when he has time at the coffee break or not. They don't talk to anyone, they just work. So, but your job is to talk. So what would you like to make the people aware of?
Mhm. Well, let me make a comment and then pose a question. That bias and discrimination are systemic. See, the technology can't solve that. People do come up with solutions. We cannot always rely on technology to solve our problems. And that's the comment. Now, the question is, could AI help us to be more objective rather than subjective? You see, so that's an important question that we have to ponder.
Yeah.
Again, it has to be a collective effort. I mean, on the journalists and writers, they cannot solve these issues. It has to be a collective effort.
That's exactly what I mean, that people who work on AI projects, they just work on projects. So they very often do not see an impact of their work on the society. So people who are in mass communication and journalists, they have I think that's their job to understand at sufficient level what the technology people are doing in order to convey the meaning and impact of their work on the society. So that's how I would see the people in mass media doing this. So I think it is important that while we have science writers, etc., are doing excellent job, and actually the impact of artificial intelligence were delivered to the masses, to the general public by people in the media, not by engineers. That's not their job, and they're really not interested in it that much.
Yes,
I disagree with you that engineers, it's not their job and they should not be interested in it. I think as human beings, it is something that they should always be interested in the back of your mind. And Dr. Kamalapour, I liked your response to what you said. I'm going to give an example of systemic bias that AI can actually address and find a way from an engineering standpoint to eliminate. So I know that we have all heard, for instance, when people are applying for jobs, if you have specific names like Julieta Hernandez, then I assume that she's Hispanic. Or if your name is Timia Leek, or if your name is Shaniqua or something, there is automatically going to be the lean. Or if your name is Ahmed, then I'm automatically assuming this is a person of color. And qualifications, and they have done studies, qualifications be damned about that those applications are immediately put on the bottom of the pile. So AI gives you the ability to create maybe when you're reviewing applications, because we know a lot of companies now use that, when you're reviewing applications, to be less focused on the name, because the name gives you an idea of gender and maybe race, less focused on the name and only focus more on the things in the resume or the application that indicate qualifications. And don't necessarily even focus on the bias of a university, you're going to automatically assume that somebody who went to Harvard is gigantically more talented than somebody who went to A&T. That is not necessarily the case. So how do you figure out what is it? Because I met some people who went to Harvard and Yale, and they are not the brightest people in the world. So how do you find ways in creating your algorithms to focus on the things that are actually most relevant? And you have to think about the things that are most relevant. So as an engineer, if I'm writing that, I'm going to have to think more broadly about how I write that software or what I do in order to make that software less biased towards anyone and actually just focus in on the points and the things that are most relevant in a job applicant, rather than things that would tilt it in one direction or another that may not in the long run be relevant.
No, I agree with you completely, but what I'm saying that's why we need input into an engineering projects from people who are not in engineering, because they are not social scientists, engineers who write programs. What I mean, they do their job. They do this, do this, do that. So someone tells them what to do, but we need input in technology projects from people who are not in engineering, who are more aware, especially now in of the impact of engineering projects onto society. That's what I am an engineer, so that I am defending engineers.
Yes, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Stacy and Dr. Fiore's points. I know from my personal experience, like within computer science, something that I learned about a couple of years ago is human-computer interaction. And so that's focusing a lot on understanding the relationship between humans and the technology that they utilize. And it's addressing a lot of different things. It's not solely about like, oh, I'm using my phone or I'm using my iPad or things like that. It's more so discovering what is the relationship that's formed between humans and our technology, as well as understanding what are different aspects about human identity that are essentially being overlooked by technology. And so from my personal experience with being in a human-computer interaction course, it really taught me a lot because I was basically being taught by people that don't have a strong engineering background. A lot of the people that taught that course, they come from like psychology, UI, UX, which kind of ties into technology, but it's like a little bit more of like a communications or mass media, things like that. And also just other aspects. And so they basically instilled this idea in me that when you're developing technology, the focus is not necessarily on what is the best project that you can develop. It's more so about what can you do about the technology that you're wanting to make and apply it to everyone, a general population, as opposed to just like very one small group, because that I think is like a mentality that is being implemented a lot within technology, and it has been for a while, to just focus on one specific like cookie cutter individual. But that individual is not reflective of the entire human population. And so I really say that to say that I think that human computer interaction and other related subjects are something that needs to be incorporated more within engineering curriculums. I think just from my personal experience, a lot of things about like computer science and engineering altogether are just focused on what are the tools that you can use, what are the methodologies that you should understand, but it's not really covering about the human aspect of everything. And so I think that that's something that's really important. It's like we need to have just like an overall overlap, because, you know, as we've seen throughout this entire conversation, there's a lot of different perspectives about it. You have some people that think that the responsibility should be on engineers, and then you have some people that think that the responsibility should be on social sciences, things like that. But I honestly think it's really just about everyone coming together and just having like a shared pool of information, because we learn best when we really just have different perspectives that are being brought in and like the entire scope of a situation, as opposed to just trying to basically separate everything and say that something needs to be only done on one side and something needs to be done on a completely different side. I think it's really important to bring in all these different components, because all that builds up to create like a finalized understanding of how to best approach different things regarding how we develop technology and how we utilize it to really just help the human population altogether.
Thank you, Alexis. I'm gonna go ahead and ask the next question I have for our communication students. And that is, do you think that AI is affecting people's perception of the media? And in your opinion, does it contribute to the misunderstanding of the media and individuals' lack of media literacy?
To answer that, I think absolutely that's undeniable. We are living in an era of misinformation. I think the first major, it was funny, but the first major concern I had for the future of AI was when the fake mugshots and arrest pictures of Donald Trump came out. It looked so real that it was like unbelievable that it wasn't. And of course, we've been seeing misinformation spread since honestly we got our hands on social media. So I do believe that AI has affected our perception of media, and it's pouring over into real life. I think another great example was when we were talking about when Queen Elizabeth, before she passed away, it was a rumor that she had already passed away from COVID or something. It was when people found out she had COVID, and that conversation was going around, and I was getting frustrated with the fact that nobody actually took the time to look up if she really passed away, because if you would have looked it up, you would have known. And it just goes to show how important it is to be ahead of the game when it comes to misinformation. I don't have all the answers to what that's going to look like in a time when people can easily just misuse information or create fake images or fake voice messages for that matter. And that goes back to, I believe it was what Mr. Kamalapur was saying, like it really boils down to who and what industry is using these things and what for. So the hackers, they're having a field day now, because you can create voices and make people say things that they never said. So I just saw another recent news article about a woman who received, or a family that received a call that their family member was kidnapped, and it sounded really believable, and it's scary. So it definitely contributes to the misunderstanding of media and individuals' lack of media literacy.
Mason?
Oh, I wanted to pose a question to you guys after you answered.
Nadia?
I think that the AI thing, it's not necessarily causing a new wave or rise in misinformation, because if we really wanted to talk about it, editing photos has been around for a very long time. There are photos of the Victorians that people still believe is their actual waist size. I think what it is now is more so it's more accessible to everyone, and that, you know, most people, and I come to this again as someone in the arts, will look at something that looks passably hyper realistic, but because we live in an age where everything's so fast all the time, and like the size of our content's getting shorter and shorter, people don't actually stop to examine, or like Brianna said, to look up anything that's going on. Because when I first saw those pictures of Donald Trump, or if anyone remembers seeing the pictures of the Pope in the puffer jacket, at first I was like, that looks kind of cool. And then I stopped to actually look at it, and I was like, these textures are all off, you know? So, but had I just looked at it and kept going, right, it would have been something that it would have registered as a lot of people did think it was at the time, it was real. So I think part of it is also that we don't slow down and take our time to actually examine or look up things for ourselves. That's contributing to the spread of misinformation.
And I agree wholeheartedly to that. And I think another perspective I just started thinking about is, I want to bring it back to a real life example of what it's like being African American in this society. Social media, for a lot of what has been my perception, my algorithm is full of what's per se entertainment, and entertainment for us, as my mentor would say, has definitely gone downhill for the past 20 years, whether it's us seeing Black women fight each other 24/7 on social media, or it's us seeing Black men hurt each other in the violence and glorification of this violence and of these negative things in our community. And in a sense, it will trick you to believe that this is what Black culture is and that this is the only thing that we have to offer to the world. And I think that's what so many young people who aren't aware enough of the impact of the media that they intake are going through when it's coming to figuring out their identities. I just actually had a long conversation with my mentor where he basically had to talk me down from believing that my identity was what I wore, the sneakers that I wear, how I wear my hair and things of that. So which those are ways that I may express my identity per se, but because of social media portraying what Blackness looks like at such a mass scale, when it comes to like the famous and celebrity Black people in social media, I was definitely blinded by that. I think it's unfortunate that we do see this now, but we also can allow our algorithms to be more diverse and representation for African Americans. Once I started liking more things, and that's what I do love about how beautiful AI is when you learn how it works. When I started liking more things that were more positive with Black people, whether it was Black people traveling or whether it was Black people in tech or Black people doing things luxury, as we say, Black girl luxury, and just different things in different areas of being exposed to, start following hashtags of Black fitness and things of that sort, your algorithms start to change. So your mindset begins to change. So I think for young people, especially those that are younger than us or who may not be in college, learning the importance of critical thinking, that it has to be some things on a mass scale done in the social world and the real world with how we are understanding what culture looks like for us.
You make an excellent point with that. And I'm gonna take it down a notch about when you look at certain things, then you start to be bombarded because AI thinks that this is the area you're interested in. And I find this funny. So if I go online and let's say I want to purchase a new refrigerator, I purchase a new refrigerator. And then for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I get all these ads for a refrigerator. Does AI know I only needed one refrigerator? Why am I still getting ads for refrigerators? So it's almost like there's that lack of, I guess, connection or intelligence for AI to know I've purchased a refrigerator, so I don't need to continue to see all these ads for refrigerators. So I think sometimes AI gets caught in the loop in making assumptions that, oh, if she was looking for a refrigerator 3 weeks ago, she's still looking for a refrigerator. Like you said, if you look at something where people were, and I've just recently joined Instagram, so you guys applaud me, I'm an old lady. But you're right about that, because I have to be very careful what I click on and what I look at, because what I find is if I looked at something I think that was a little negative or whatever, then what I find is I'm seeing way too much of that. Where was all the positive stuff I was seeing a few weeks ago? Where is that again? So you have to be very careful, because AI can read more into, in terms of collecting the whole big data thing, maybe read more into what they think you're interested than what you really are. So, you know, how do we address that? And I'm not even posing it as a negative. I'm saying that's a particular area of AI. How do we address that lack of that single threadedness that it can sometimes lead to? If you express an interest in something, that doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're interested in.
Thank you, Stacy. I do want to point out that we do have only about 9 minutes left, so I do want to go ahead and get Mason's question in for our communication students, and then I also want to move into our positive impacts after that.
Okay. So our professor, Dr. Homafar, in class a few days ago, he kind of posed a question kind of based off of this social media. You can say whatever you want, and people generally spread misinformation, not necessarily on purpose, but just because they don't know everything, but they, present their opinions like they do. In the age of AI, things are getting a lot more, it's a lot easier, like you were saying, to be able to deep fake something or create something, say, for example, like with that Drake and Weeknd song that was blown up a few weeks ago, that didn't exist. It was 100% AI. Do you feel like there should be like, do you feel like there should be consequences for people saying things or creating things that aren't necessarily true? Like, say, for example, you think people should kind of start to put kind of like a limitation on what things you can get away with social media that aren't true? How do you feel about that?
Oh, do you want to go first?
You go ahead.
I think something that we need to tread carefully upon, because there's things that people make as a joke, of course, that we all know was created as a joke. And then there's things that people create with actual intent and malice. And this is just disregarding copyright, because that's an entire separate can of worms. Like that Drake and Weeknd song, that's a copyright issue, right? But that's not necessarily someone actively spreading misinformation, you know, because as much as many cool things that I've seen AI do, and I know that it's capable of, I also know that that deep fake thing is really scary, because it's like you're hearing about, or even if you're not liberal with the block button, you wind up seeing people circulating images of like people have used AI to like remove hijabi women's clothing. Like it's insane. And I think that it's something that we need to tread carefully on, where there's things where it's like there's clear intent and malice that's involved, right, with stuff like that, or the active spread of misinformation, like when they were spreading around those AI generated images of a protest, which was to incite police violence, versus someone making something funny for a laugh. I think we need to tread carefully on that, because people do things for fun and people do things for harm, but we need to make sure that the people can still have fun, if that makes any sense.
I agree. And from an ethics perspective, with the history that our country has with policing, obviously we far from mastered what policing is actually supposed to look like. I think the moment you start policing technology, something that's, I'm not going to say not harmful, but isn't as harmful as someone's actual in real life reality actions, then we start to pull away focus from the things that are actually mattering in this country. I think it's more than enough issues as humans, with humans' rights and civil rights and activism as actual in reality to worry about before we start trying to pull the big guns out when it comes to like how to deal with AI ethics. However, I do feel like there needs to be terms and conditions that once they're broken, that users don't have access to use anymore. Or, you know, I feel like we can start with simple things like that. But once you start trying to arrest people or sue people for things that aren't necessarily harming the masses or harming people physically in their real lives, then that's, I don't know, it's really hard. It's really hard, because then you have examples of where people spread misinformation about people. Next thing you know, they're doxing them and putting their addresses out for people to come seriously harm them. In cases like that, that is when it's physical, real reality harm. So it does need to be those big guns pulled out. But that's where we have to figure out what's the thin line, what are the do's and the don'ts, and how are we making these terms and conditions where everyone understands the do's and don'ts, because we know terms and conditions just get, at this point in social media, click, accept, next, and now I'm going to go break all of them. That's what happens. So yeah, I think we have a lot of discussion. This discussion alone, it's going to be, like Mr. Kamalapur said, this is going to be discussion that's going to have to happen for pretty much ever now, but this is a start.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone who has, participated in the, concerning parts of AI. But we do also have positive stuff about AI, and it is bringing good things to the table. Some examples are the creation of self-driving cars and other autonomous vehicles have been shown to potentially reduce the traffic accidents and significantly improve transportation efficiency. Reduction of human error is another one. It's one of the biggest advantages of artificial intelligence, and it's that it can reduce errors and increase accuracy and precision. And it can also make life easier. AI is there to assist us with routine tasks through the use of smart gadgets and virtual assistants, such as Siri and Alexa. So one question I have for our panelists is, if they could give us an example, if one of them could give us an example how AI is positively impacting their work or their daily life.
I could go first. Honestly, for me, ChatGPT has been a wonderful tool. And I say that because I, for one, I don't know everything and I don't pretend I do. However, I know a lot of times I do want to get like a good basis on things. Say, for example, I saw this job, one of my favorite artists of all time, Childish Gambino / Donald Glover. He came out with roles for a project he wanted to start. And one of them was prompt engineering. I had no idea what prompt engineering was. So I looked it up on ChatGPT and it gave me a really good starting point to go forward. And I feel like, I guess the way I learn, I like to take things and then deep dive into them myself. And I feel like that tool helps me get a really good brief understanding so I could go in and understand things a lot easier. That's my example.
I guess I could give an example too. As someone, I'm a full-time college student out of state who runs a clothing business, who's in who knows how many clubs, and I'm very active in them, and I have my own organization, and the list goes on. So something that's very important to me is time management and efficiency. And even though I just found out about ChatGPT, it's been making major changes in my life, whether it's me saving time with planning or me saving time with an essay outline and things of that sort. While my ethics on ChatGPT is never copy and paste anything. I use everything as an outline or a point of reference to deeply understand something, as Mason was saying. But something that I just recently discovered I could use ChatGPT for to help be efficient in my business was I needed to make a content creating schedule. And I asked ChatGPT, could you make a content calendar, social media content calendar for me for 1 month where I post 3 times a week. And I made it very specific for a clothing brand that inspires people to elevate. And it literally did 4 weeks worth of things that I would have probably taken 2 hours to write down and actually plan out. And it told me exactly to the T what type of content, how to be diverse in the content, etc. And things like that is just the power in AI that so many people, once they get to actually learn it and see how easy and simple it is to use, it can help people in these industries that we're scared we'll lose our jobs, but it can help us be more powerful and more of an asset to these companies. And I'm gonna apply my clothing business link in the chat, y'all.
Thank you. Yes, that is, I've never even thought about using ChatGPT for those type of, inquiries. It's very interesting what AI can do for us. So I also have another question for our communications folks on the topic of content creation. Humans still have to decide which situations to call for creativity and which to call for commodity. Do you think there will be a chance in the future where content creators, social media managers, and journalists solely rely on AI to produce and create their content?
Oh, well, I'll respond to that. I do think that, like I was just saying, perfect example, using this as a outline. Me personally, with my morals and ethics, I never want to copy and paste anything because, you just want to stay in tune with your human side and making sure that you're not being used by these things. However, I do think that it will be in the future, maybe not in the near future, but people will become codependent on AI in the same way that we became codependent on social media just from us being indoctrinated into it. And if the first thing you do is check your phone and you have access to these things that make it were supposed to make your life easier, you become attached to it. And I don't know where, once again, that line will be drawn between actual human creativity and then AI production. So I do believe that people will become more reliant on it in the future.
Thank you.
I
Go ahead,
think
Nadia.
in regards to this is that I think we need to be wary of fully relying on AI, but we also need to be aware that the way that the world is that money makes the world go round, right? So even though as a creative, as someone working in this field or that, you'd want to still create things on your own accord, because of course, as a human, you can breed your own creativity, right? And you can talk with other people to create new things. Algorithms are, again, they're very big with efficiency. And so it will help you make more things fast, but it won't necessarily have that human touch to it, that human spark. So I think AI could be very good with aiding in efficiency, but we also need to be careful to not completely sideline the humans that make these things work, if that makes any sense.
Yes, it does. Great point as well there. Thank you so much. I am also going to move on to our engineers. I have a question for them. And that is, to what extent is AI affecting your industry today? And what are your personal concerns as a student engineer for the future of AI? So anyone, Mason, Tamia, or Alexis can go.
I
I
think,
can-
and
Go ahead.
or you can go ahead. As far as like AI affecting our industry as engineers, it's kind of, I mean, because we're the ones that's kind of making algorithms for AI. And so it's going to eventually come to a point where these AI machines or these AI technologies are starting to take our jobs, which means there will be less human interaction. And that's a personal concern that I have as a student engineer today, because once graduation happens in May, I start my real job by going to the real world. And I have to kind of be aware of all of these AI technologies surrounding me and things like that. But I mean, like we've talked about before, it's 50-50 with AI, benefiting society and also hurting society. But my biggest thing is just human interaction, because once these technologies start taking over jobs that, these individuals have been working for years and years and years, it's just kind of like, what do we have left as society? If there's no human interaction, then it's just more so of, okay, if there's no human interaction, then what's left for us? And that's kind of my concern as an engineering student.
I want to pivot a little bit. So comp sci Professor Edmondson, I was asking him about ChatGPT from his personal perspective, an AI tool. And he was saying at this stage, it's essentially like a pseudo chef, as for a coder, it's a pseudo chef. You can ask it to do certain things for you, but it's never going to give you what you truly need. However, me personally, I didn't understand what he was talking about because I asked it to code for me because I'm electrical, I'm not computer. So things like that, not really understanding what the purpose is behind the action, I feel like is a concern of mine. I know a lot of us as students, a lot of this stuff is hard. We don't understand all of it, but sometimes people don't even get what they're supposed to know at its core. I don't want to get too specific into electrical engineering, but a few of my peers don't know necessarily what electrical engineering is at its basis. They can't carry that general conversation because they spent a lot of their time searching things up rather than trying to figure it out to get that bad grade and then learn from it type of thing. So I feel like with the implementation of AI and with things getting easier, people tend to lose that general understanding of what engineering is supposed to be at its core, because it's problem solving, right? You don't know what's happening, so you use your prior knowledge to figure out this problem that's never been solved before and then work through it. That's what it is. And with ChatGPT, if you have all the answers, you'll never have to go through that problem solving step. So I feel like that's my biggest concern with it. But it's also a really good tool. I just want to say that too. It can take a lot of stress off of people and make those menial and mundane tasks a lot quicker, so you can really get to the core of things as well.
Just something to kind of I guess bridge together what Tamia and Mason talked about. I think an issue that I think is kind of top of mind for me is natural language processing. I think that's something that's reflected a lot within ChatGPT, but also in other technological tools. Like for instance, if you're using Netflix, you typically may have subtitles that come up, but those are usually generated by Netflix. But those are also seen on YouTube and things like that. That may be automated subtitles. And a lot of that is stemming from algorithms are basically able to pick up on human speech and essentially take what is being heard and convert it into words. And so I think there are some positives to it, and I think there's also some negatives. For instance, a positive, I think is really good for people that are wanting to learn a new language. They're able to watch other videos in a different language and basically still be able to understand the entire conversation while learning a new language at the same time. They may be able to read something that's in English, but then something that's also in another language. And that's because you have AI that's able to pick up on those different, on the different words and make that translation basically almost immediately. And I think that's something that's really amazing. That's helping to kind of like make our worlds a lot more interconnected because, you know, of course, with globalization and everything, there's a lot of interaction that we're having to have with people from other cultures, people that speak different languages from us. And so I think it's really great to be able to connect better with other people because we have AI that's available to help us with that entire process. On the flip side, though, I do think that natural language processing is something that needs to be, it needs to improve over time, but there is like a kind of like a catch-22 with that. And something that kind of comes top of mind about it is, I remember a few years ago, I participated in a competition where the focus is identifying where there are issues regarding design within technology. And so one group, they came up with this idea of utilizing natural language processing to better detect African-American vernacular English, which is also known as AAVE. And me personally, like when I first heard about it, I thought that that was something that would be really great because so often you have AAVE that's basically written off as just like internet slang, or it's something that is not basically attributed to Blackness, even though that is something that is central to our identity, especially for African Americans. But the only thing that I'm kind of just worried about the entire situation is I'm concerned about how implementing natural language processing to pick up on AAVE may eventually lead to a situation where you have people that are continuing to misuse it, which is, you know, very present a lot on social media, as well as the issue of people like participating in blackfishing and things like that, where they're emulating a Black person, but they themselves are not Black. So I bring that to mind because I think with natural language processing and with AI altogether, we do have to be considerate of different limitations and just the overall impact. And I think that's something that we talked about a lot within this conversation, is just understanding like how we can develop something but still be recognizing like the overall consequences of it. And I think that's a conversation that's going to take a lot of time to consider. We have to, you know, bring in different perspectives and everything. And it's not something that will be solved immediately. It's something that we have to think about over a long span of time because there are positive sides to everything and there are also negative sides. So I think it's something that we should be considerate of, but I do think natural language processing in the future will ultimately help all of us. We just have to be very considerate in how we're applying it and, you know, just overall developing it.
Can I
Thank
say
you.
one last thing, Julietta? And
Yes,
then I'm
go for
sorry, I
it.
didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to be able to address everything that's been said. I'm very impressed with all of you, the students from both sides, not just communications, but engineering. And I see so much talent and intelligence here. And I just want to give you a little bit of advice. When it comes to AI in the future, because you're not going to be students forever, make sure wherever you land and whatever you do in your future endeavors, that you address and you build on the positives of AI. And you also think about being disruptors as far as the negatives go, and not just focus on leaving school and going into industry and being an industry drone, but being a disruptor by being entrepreneurs and establishing your own companies and your own groups to be able to not wait for someone else to include you in the conversation, but you lead your own conversations, lead your own solutions. So I think the future for addressing some of these things is to consider being an entrepreneur and using your creativity and your talents to tackle it yourself. But excellent job, all of you.
Totally agree, Stacy. Thank you. Thank you so much. One last question just to pose for everybody in here is, have you ever noticed how much of AI is being implemented into your world? And what are ways that you are using AI or have seen AI being used, and how does it make you feel? So if someone wants to answer that, one person, or just, like I said, a question to ponder and, you know, just think about. And yeah, if anybody also has any additional questions or comments for our panelists, now would be a great time as well. Or yeah.
I just want to say I absolutely was underestimating how deeply intertwined AI is in everything. Like, anytime we literally touch a screen, we're using AI. So I thought that was very interesting to learn. And I just wanted to say to all of you, I really do appreciate this conversation. I think that just having these different perspectives is a beautiful thing, especially for us all being people of color. Like, I think it's amazing what we can do when we bring our different perspectives and our different expertise into the equation and value each other's opinions and actually come up with tangible solutions. That's what community is about. And that's the unity that we don't often see in those algorithms on social media. So this is the algorithms that we need to be developing to be pushed into our youth. So that's my take on everything. Thank you guys so much. I left my contact information in the comments as well.
Well, thank you, Julieta, and all the panelists for a wonderful and informative discussion. Our plan is to continue this discussion as we move on. And next year we'll have a similar panel, probably during the same period. Press on and make your impact as you move on and think out of the box. And thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you, thank you. Yes, so just some last minute, comments from me. I just want to say I have really enjoyed this panel, and this discussion has been really great. I've enjoyed hearing everyone's thoughts and comments and questions and concerns. It's been really a big eye opener because I personally have only been really investing myself into AI and researching about it this year. So my knowledge is not super big, but it's been really great getting to see everyone else's perspectives and everyone who, who works in this industry, to see like what they think about it as well and how it's impacting all of us all over the country, all over the world. I do want to thank all of our panelists for taking some time to speak with us about artificial intelligence. And as we can see, AI is beginning to take place in many industries and can affect our daily routine and lives in a positive and slightly negative way at times. But it's a great thing that it's sparking up conversation, I feel. I would also like to thank the NASA ULI leadership team for sponsoring this panel. And once again, thank you all for showing up and participating and asking great questions. I hope everyone has a great rest of your weekend. And yeah, like everyone has mentioned before in the chat, there is, they have left their emails and LinkedIn's in case y'all want to get in contact with them again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.